Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, the man who sat next to Oprah Winfrey and let his wife imply that the royal family harbored racists, the man who published a tell-all memoir dragging every private moment of his family's life into the harsh fluorescent light of a Barnes and Noble display table, the man who has spent the better part of 5 years wagging a one-sided war against the very institution that gave him everything, that man now wants help, and not from just anyone. From Catherine, the sheer breathtaking audacity of it, reports have emerged, and they are persistent, detailed, and coming from multiple directions, that Prince Harry has reached out, either directly or through intermediaries, to Princess Catherine, expressing a deeply personal and frankly extraordinary request. He wants his children, Archie and Lilibet, to be raised with royal values, with royal structure, with the discipline, the tradition, the sense of duty and service that defines the British monarchy at its best. In other words, he wants his children raised in the exact opposite manner to how they're currently being raised in Montecito, California, under the creative direction of Meghan Markle. Now, pause with me here, because the layers of irony in this situation are so thick, so densely packed, that you could spend a university semester unpacking them and still not reach the bottom. This is a man who left the royal family, who renounced his working royal status, who moved 6,000 miles away to a mansion in Southern California, who told the world repeatedly and with great theatrical conviction that the royal way of life was toxic, suffocating, and psychologically damaging. He wrote a book about it. He produced documentaries about it. He gave interview after interview, each one more damning than the last, describing the institution his family has served for over 1,000 years as something akin to a gilded prison. And now he wants his children raised in the royal tradition. You could not write this. If a screenwriter pitched this plot to Netflix, they would be told it was too implausible, too on the nose, too cartoonishly hypocritical for even fictional characters to carry. But this is not fiction. This is Harry. Let us address the question that hangs in the air like morning fog over the Thames. Why Catherine? Why, of all the people in the world, would Harry turn to the Princess of Wales, the woman who arguably has more reason than anyone on earth to refuse him? Their answer is as simple as it is damning, because Catherine is the gold standard. Even Harry, in his most deluded moments, knows this. Catherine has raised her children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, with a grace, a discipline, and a warmth that has earned her universal admiration. Those children are polite, they are grounded, they understand duty, they understand service. They wave at crowds with genuine smiles, not because cameras are rolling for a Netflix special, but because they have been taught that their role comes with responsibility. Catherine has achieved what every royal parent aspires to and very few accomplish. She has raised children who are both royal and real, who understand privilege but are not consumed by it, who know they are different but do not believe they are better. Harry sees this. He sees George confidently attending state events. He sees Charlotte's poise. He sees Louis's infectious joy. And then he looks at his own children being raised in a bubble of celebrity culture, surrounded by brand deals and podcast negotiations and paparazzi baiting coffee runs, and something breaks inside him. It should break inside him, because the contrast is devastating. But here is what Harry does not seem to understand, and this is critical. You do not get to set fire to someone's house and then knock on their door asking to borrow a cup of sugar. You just do not. Let us now do something that Harry clearly has not done. Let us review the record. Let us lay out, item by item, the catalogue of offences that Harry and Meghan have committed against Princess Catherine. Because if Harry has genuinely asked for her help, then he has done so while apparently suffering from the most spectacular case of amnesia in modern royal history. Item 1. The Oprah interview, March 2021. During that interview, Meghan Markle, Harry's wife, sitting right next to him, made Catherine cry. Wait, no, let me correct myself. Meghan first claimed that Catherine made her cry in a story about bridesmaid dresses. Then when pressed, she acknowledged that actually it was Catherine who cried. But by then the damage was done. The global narrative had been set. Catherine was painted as cold, as difficult, as unwelcoming. Harry sat there. He said nothing in Catherine's defense. Not one word. Item 2. The racism allegation. During that same interview, Meghan claimed that a member of the royal family had expressed concerns about the skin color of their unborn child. She and Harry refused to name the individual, leaving the entire family, including Catherine, under a cloud of suspicion. The implication hung over every member of the household like a poisonous fog. The world speculated. Fingers were pointed. Reputations were damaged, and Harry let it happen. He could have clarified. He could have named the person if the allegation was genuine. He could have exonerated the innocent. He did none of these things. He let the grenade roll across the floor and watched as everyone scrambled. Item 3. The book Spare, published in January 2023. In it, Harry described private family moments with excruciating detail. He wrote about arguments, about tensions, about deeply personal interactions that were never meant for public consumption. Catherine featured prominently. Her private life, her private conversations, her private struggles, all of it served up for public entertainment and book sales. Item 4. The documentaries. The Netflix series. Harry and Meghan rolling their eyes, mocking the royal tradition of curtsying, making light of the very protocols and customs that Catherine has spent over a decade mastering and upholding with dignity. The message was clear: we think your life is ridiculous. We think your traditions are absurd. We think you are all trapped in an outdated institution, and we are the enlightened ones who escaped. And now, this man wants Catherine's help raising his children in the royal tradition he so publicly mocked. The hypocrisy is genuinely making my head spin. Let us talk about the elephant in the room, or rather, the Duchess in Montecito. Because embedded in this request is an admission so explosive, so fundamentally damaging to the Sussex brand, that it is astonishing it has not received more attention. Harry wants his children protected from Meghan's influence. Read that again. Harry, the man who gave up his country, his family, his military titles, his reputation, and his relationship with his brother for this woman, is now apparently concerned that her parenting style, her values, her Hollywood approach to child-rearing, is not what he wants for Archie and Lilibet. He does not want them raised in the Hollywood way. He does not want them as props in a celebrity lifestyle. He does not want them growing up thinking that life is about brand partnerships and magazine covers and carefully curated Instagram posts. He wants them to understand duty, service, tradition, restraint. He wants them to be royal. And the person preventing that, the person steering them in the opposite direction, is their mother. Now, I want to be very careful here, because this is a serious matter. If Harry genuinely believes that his children are being raised in a way that is harmful or misaligned with their best interests, that is a legitimate parental concern. Every parent has the right, indeed the obligation, to advocate for their children's welfare. But here is the devastating irony: Harry created this situation. Every single element of it. He chose Meghan. He chose to leave. He chose California. He chose to sever ties with the very family and institution whose values he now wants for his children. He built this cage, and now he is rattling the bars. And instead of looking inward, instead of examining his own catastrophic decisions, instead of having the difficult conversations within his own household, he picks up the phone and calls Catherine, because that is what Harry does. He externalizes everything. Nothing is ever his fault. Nothing is ever his responsibility. There is always someone else to blame, and always someone else to fix it. And now I need to address something that makes this entire situation not just hypocritical, not just audacious, but genuinely cruel. Princess Catherine is fighting cancer. She announced her diagnosis in March 2024, in a video that moved the entire nation, indeed, the entire world, to tears. She spoke with courage, with grace, with a quiet determination that exemplified everything the monarchy aspires to represent. She has been undergoing treatment. She has been stepping back from public duties. She has been focusing, as anyone in her position absolutely should, on her health, her recovery, and her family. Her children need her. William needs her. The institution needs her. The nation needs her. And Harry, who has done nothing but add to her stress. Nothing but pour gasoline on the fires surrounding the family. Nothing but make her life more difficult at every conceivable turn, Harry calls her up and asks for help with his parenting problems. The selfishness of it defies description. This is a woman fighting for her life, and Harry's response is to add to her burden, to place his problems entirely of his own making, on her shoulders. What kind of person does that? I will tell you what kind. The kind who has been so thoroughly cocooned in his own narrative of victimhood that he has lost the ability to see other people as fully human. The kind who has been told day after day by sycophants and PR advisors and probably by Meghan herself that his feelings are the most important feelings in any room. A narcissist, that is the word. And I do not use it lightly or diagnostically. I use it descriptively. Because Harry's behavior, consistently and over a prolonged period, exhibits a pattern of self-absorption so profound that it has rendered him incapable of basic empathy. Catherine is fighting cancer, and Harry wants her to help him parent. The cruelty is almost elegant in its completeness. This brings us to a question that has been building for years, that has been whispered in corridors and debated in columns, and shouted on social media with increasing volume and decreasing patience. Strip them of their titles, be done with it, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. These titles carry weight, they carry history, they carry the implicit endorsement of the crown. And every single day that Harry and Meghan retain them, they use them, not in service of the nation, not in furtherance of the monarchy's mission, but as a brand, a marketing tool, a calling card that opens doors in Hollywood and Silicon Valley and wherever else they happen to be seeking their next deal. They trade on the very institution they have spent years attacking. They monetize a family name they have dragged through the mud. They use royal titles to sell products, secure speaking engagements, and negotiate entertainment contracts. And the question that millions of people across the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth are asking with increasing frustration is simple. Why are they still allowed to do this? Strip the titles. Remove the Duke and Duchess designations. Let Harry be Mr. Henry Mountbatten Windsor. Let Meghan be Ms. Markle again. If they want nothing to do with the royal family, if they believe the institution is racist and toxic and psychologically damaging, then let them have their wish in full. Let them be completely, totally, irrevocably free of it, including the titles, including the branding, including the cachet. See how many Netflix deals come calling then. See how many opera interviews materialize when you are just another celebrity couple in Montecito without a royal prefix to distinguish you from the thousands of other famous faces at the farmer's market. Harry wants royal values for his children, but not royal obligations for himself. He wants the prestige without the duty, the crown without the weight, the title without the service. That is not how any of this works. That is not how it has ever worked. And the patience of the British public, a patient and tolerant public by any historical standard, is exhausted. We have not yet spoken about Prince William in all of this, and we should, because William's silence on this matter is in many ways the most eloquent statement of all. William, Harry's brother, Catherine's husband, the future king, has maintained a dignified, resolute, and increasingly icy distance from his younger sibling. And who can blame him? William watched Harry sit on television and allow his wife to be smeared. He watched Harry publish a book that violated the most sacred bonds of family privacy. He watched Harry mock the institution that William has spent his entire life preparing to lead. He watched Harry leave, and then, worse than leaving, he watched Harry turn around and throw stones at the house he had just walked out of. If Harry has indeed reached out to Catherine, you can be certain that William knows about it. And you can be equally certain that William's response would have been at best cold, because William, unlike Harry, understands something fundamental about family, about duty, and about consequence. He understands that trust, once broken, is not easily rebuilt, that wounds, once inflicted, do not heal simply because the person holding the knife decides they would rather be friends again. William is protecting his wife. He is protecting his children. He is protecting the institution he will one day lead, and he is doing all of this while navigating Catherine's health crisis with a grace and a strength that should put Harry to shame. The contrast between these two brothers, one stepping up, the other melting down, is a story Shakespeare himself would have envied, and so we arrive at the portrait of Harry as he is today, not as he was, not as we remember him. Not the cheeky, red-haired prince who charmed the world at his brother's wedding. Not the soldier who served in Afghanistan. Not the man who created the Invictus Games and inspired wounded veterans across the globe. That Harry is gone. In his place stands a man isolated. A man who has alienated his father, alienated his brother, alienated his sister-in-law, alienated the institution that raised him, alienated the country that loved him. A man whose circle has shrunk to a Montecito mansion, and the handful of people who remain financially or professionally incentivized to stay close. A man who is beginning, perhaps for the first time, to realize the enormity of what he has done, and who is discovering to his apparent horror that the bridges he burned so enthusiastically were the only bridges that mattered. He is in tears, we are told, and perhaps he should be, but tears without accountability are just performance. Tears without genuine change are just another episode in the ongoing Sussex drama series. And the audience, the British public, the Commonwealth, the world is tired of the show, so what should happen? What is the appropriate response to a man who has done everything Harry has done and now comes crawling back? Not with an apology, not with a public retraction, not with genuine contrition, but with a request for help. First, Catherine should be left in peace. Complete and total peace. She owes Harry nothing, less than nothing. She should be allowed to focus on her health, her children, and her husband without the added burden of Harry's self-inflicted crises landing on her doorstep. Second, the palace should act on the titles question, decisively and finally. The Sussex titles have become a commercial enterprise masquerading as royal distinction, and it is past time that the charade ended. Third, and this may be the hardest truth of all, Harry needs to look in the mirror. Not metaphorically, literally, he needs to sit in a quiet room, away from the cameras and the PR advisors and the celebrity friends, and yes, away from Meghan, and he needs to ask himself one simple question. What have I done? Not what has been done to me. Not what the media did. Not what the palace did. Not what his family did. What has he done? Because until Harry can answer that question honestly, until he can look at the wreckage of his relationships and accept that he held the match, nothing will change. The tears will continue, the isolation will deepen, and the children he claims to be fighting for will grow up watching their father spiral further and further from the family and the values he says he wants for them. There is a word in the English language that Harry seems to have forgotten. It is a small word, just 5 letters. But it contains more power than any Netflix deal, any opera interview, any best-selling memoir. Sorry, not sorry with caveats. Not sorry, but here is why I was actually right. Not sorry in a way that secretly blames everyone else. Just sorry to Catherine for what Meghan said and what he allowed to stand. Sorry to William for betraying his confidence. Sorry to his father for the public humiliation. Sorry to the nation for weaponizing their goodwill. Sorry to his children for creating a situation in which their father has to beg his estranged sister-in-law for help, can no longer navigate his own household. But sorry requires humility, and humility requires the death of ego, and Harry's ego. Inflated by years of enabling and validation from people who profit from his grievances, shows no signs of dying anytime soon. So here we are, a prince in tears, a princess fighting cancer, a family fractured, a nation watching, and a man who still cannot see that he is both the arsonist and the victim of the fire. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the tragedy of Prince Harry. Not that bad things happened to him. Bad things happen to everyone. But that he was given every tool, every advantage, every opportunity to build a meaningful life of service and purpose, and he threw it all away for a life in Montecito that is now crumbling around him. And the saddest part, the very person he is calling for help is the living proof of the life he could have had. Catherine did not run. Catherine did not complain. Catherine did not sit with opera. Catherine showed up every single day, even when it was hard, even when it was unfair. Even when she was sick. Now, I have been covering royal affairs for long enough to think that very little can surprise me anymore. I have sat through the opera interview. I read Spare from cover to cover. I watched the Netflix documentaries with my own eyes. I have, over the course of the last several years, witnessed a sustained campaign of public destruction against the British royal family that has been without precedent in modern history. And yet, even I had to sit back when this particular story emerged. Even I needed a moment. Because the breathtaking nature of what is being asked here, the sheer scale of the presumption, takes some time to fully absorb. Harry was not always this man. That is the thing people need to hold on to because it is important context for everything that follows. There was a version of Prince Harry that the British public genuinely loved, not tolerated, not respected at arm's length. Loved. He was the cheeky one, the one who made the monarchy feel accessible and human. He wore his heart on his sleeve in a way that his brother, more naturally suited to the weight of future kingship, found harder to do publicly. He served in the military and did it with genuine distinction, not as a photo opportunity, but as a real soldier who flew in real combat zones and understood what it meant to serve alongside people whose lives depended on you. He created the Invictus Games. That alone deserves acknowledgement because it was a genuinely brilliant idea, brilliantly executed, that gave wounded veterans from across the world a stage and a purpose and a community. That was Harry at his best. That was what he could have continued to be. And then Meghan Markle walked into his life, and everything changed. Now, I am not going to lay every single thing that has gone wrong at Meghan's feet, because that would be intellectually dishonest, and I pride myself on not being intellectually dishonest. Harry is a grown man. He made choices. He continues to make choices. He is not a puppet. He is not a victim of circumstance. He is a fully formed adult human being who at every crossroads made a decision and has to own that decision. But it would be equally dishonest to pretend that the transformation in Harry since Meghan's arrival has not been dramatic, visible, and deeply troubling to anyone who was paying attention. The man who once embodied quiet service became the man who outsourced his grievances to American television. The man who once understood instinctively that some things are sacred and private became the man who published his family's most intimate arguments for a reported $20 million. The man who once stood at his grandmother's coffin with a dignity that moved a nation became the man who complained in a podcast about the temperature of his childhood bedroom. Something happened. Something changed. And that something, by all available evidence, was a profound and total capture of Harry's identity by a woman who saw in him not a partner to build a life with but a vehicle for a very specific kind of ambition. But again, he chose this. He continues to choose it. And that is what makes his current distress, his tears, his desperation, his reaching out to Catherine, so difficult to process with anything other than a cold and unflinching eye. Because what Harry is now experiencing is not the cruelty of fate. It is not bad luck. It is not the universe conspiring against a good man. What Harry is experiencing is consequence. Plain, simple, unavoidable consequence. The natural and entirely predictable result of a series of decisions that he made freely, publicly, and with apparent enthusiasm. He chose to leave. The consequences of leaving are that you are gone. He chose to speak. The consequences of speaking are that the people you spoke about do not forget what you said. He chose to allow his wife to make certain allegations against his family. The consequences of that choice are that his family, quite reasonably, looks at his wife with something less than warmth. He chose to publish a book. The consequences of publishing that book are that the people whose secrets he published now regard him as someone whose confidence cannot be trusted. These are not complicated equations. They are not difficult moral puzzles. They are the most basic logic of human relationships, applied to a very famous and very extraordinary family. And the fact that Harry appears genuinely surprised by these consequences, genuinely hurt that Catherine will not simply set all of it aside and ride to his rescue, tells you everything you need to know about the depth of his self-awareness, or rather, the lack of it. Let us talk specifically about Catherine for a moment, because she deserves more than to be discussed simply as a supporting character in Harry's ongoing drama. She is in her own right one of the most remarkable women in public life today, and I say that not as flattery, not as sycophancy, but as a straightforward assessment of the evidence. When Catherine first entered the public eye as William's girlfriend, she was scrutinized with a ferocity that would have broken most people. The press was merciless. The public was unforgiving. She was too thin than not thin enough, too fashionable than not fashionable enough. Too middle class for royalty, then accused of being too ambitious in pursuing it. She waited years for William to commit, and she did so with a dignity that never curdled into bitterness, never expressed itself as a grievance performance, never became a Netflix documentary. She simply waited. And when the time came, she stepped into the role of royal consort with a grace and an evident commitment to service that won over even the most cynical observers. Then she became a mother. And here is where Catherine's story becomes not just admirable but genuinely instructive. She raised 3 children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, in circumstances that are almost impossible to imagine. Every public appearance scrutinized, every parenting decision analyzed, every facial expression at a state event dissected for meaning. And yet those children are, by every visible measure, wonderful. They are grounded, they are joyful, they are polite, they are real. George understands that he will one day be king, and carries that knowledge with a quiet composure that is extraordinary in someone so young. Charlotte has a confidence and a warmth that lights up every room she enters. And Louis with his magnificent, uninhibited expressions at every public event, is the most human advertisement for happy, healthy childhood that the royal family has produced in living memory. Catherine did that, in the middle of relentless public scrutiny. In the middle of a family crisis not of her making, in the middle of her own profound health battle, she did that. And now Harry, who watched all of this happen, who knows exactly what Catherine has sacrificed and suffered and achieved, comes to her with his problems. I want to be precise about what Harry is actually asking, because I think it is important that we do not obscure it behind diplomatic language. He is asking Catherine to compensate for the deficiencies of his own household. He is asking her to provide for his children the royal values and structure and sense of identity that their own mother is apparently not providing. He is asking a woman with cancer, whose children need her, whose husband needs her, whose nation needs her, to take on the additional burden of his parenting failures. And he is asking this of a woman whose reputation his wife deliberately and systematically attacked on the world stage. A woman whose private moments of vulnerability Harry himself exposed in print. A woman who has every reason in the world to say the single word that Harry most needs to hear and least deserves to receive. No, because Catherine's saying no to Harry is not cruelty. It is not pettiness. It is not the action of someone who cannot forgive, who holds grudges for sport. It is the entirely rational, entirely justified response of a woman who has learned, through painful and very public experience, that extending trust to Harry and Meghan leads to betrayal. It leads to it being used, twisted, weaponized. Catherine has a responsibility to herself. She has a responsibility to her health. She has a responsibility to her children. She has a responsibility to William. And she has a responsibility, frankly, to her own dignity. The dignity she has worked ferociously hard to maintain through circumstances that would have flattened lesser people. Harry is not her responsibility. He has not been her responsibility since the moment he chose to leave. And the idea that she should now set aside her own considerable needs to manage the fallout from his considerable mistakes is not just unreasonable. It is offensive. Strip their titles. I want to come back to this because I think it is the question that sits underneath everything else, and it deserves a proper airing. The titles Duke and Duchess of Sussex are not merely honorifics at this point. They are currency. They are the fuel in the engine of an entire commercial enterprise built on the Sussex brand. Without those titles, Harry is a veteran with a complicated family history and some mental health advocacy experience. With them, he is a prince. And that distinction in the world Harry and Meghan now inhabit is worth millions. Every speaking engagement, every brand partnership, every streaming deal, every carefully engineered public appearance, all of it draws its value directly or indirectly from the royal connection. From the fact that when people look at Harry they see a prince, when they look at Meghan they see a princess. That is what they are selling. That is the product. And the product was manufactured by the very institution they have spent years attacking. The hypocrisy of this arrangement is so brazen that it has become almost normalized through sheer repetition. We have watched it for so long that we risk forgetting how extraordinary it is. These two people left the royal family, declared it toxic and racist and psychologically damaging, and then continued to profit from their association with it. They bit the hand that feeds them and then demanded the hand keep feeding them, and the hand, bewilderingly, frustratingly, has largely complied. The argument against stripping the titles is usually framed around the children. Archie and Lilibet, their status, their identities, the complications that would arise. And I understand that argument. I do not dismiss it. Children should not be punished for the decisions of their parents, and any action that affects their lives needs to be considered carefully. But here is the thing about that argument: it is being deployed strategically. It is the shield Harry and Meghan have learned to hold up whenever consequences come calling. The children, always the children. We are doing this for the children. We left to protect the children. We need these titles for the children. And yet, the man is apparently so concerned about his children's well-being, so troubled by the environment they are growing up in, that he is weeping and calling estranged relatives for help. So which is it? Are the children fine, being raised in the enlightened, progressive sunshine of Montecito, far from the toxic institution of the British monarchy? Or are they not fine, in need of rescue, in need of the very royal values their father so dramatically rejected? Harry cannot have it both ways. He has been trying to have it both ways for 5 years, and the scaffolding is finally, visibly, collapsing. Now let us talk about William. Because William's position in all of this is both heartbreaking and clarifying. William loved his brother. That is not a sentimental assumption. It is evident from every piece of reliable testimony, from every account of their relationship before it fractured. These were two boys who lost their mother at devastating ages, who clung to each other through grief, who navigated the impossible terrain of royal childhood side by side. The bond between them was real, and it was deep, and it was forged in the kind of shared suffering that creates connections most people never experience. Harry destroyed it, not gradually, not accidentally. Deliberately, methodically, and publicly. He aired William's private words in a best-selling book. He sat on television and allowed allegations to hang over William's wife. He produced content that mocked William's life and choices. He burned every bridge between them, and then, apparently, expressed surprise that the river was too wide to cross. William is not a man given to public displays of emotion. He is his mother's son in many ways, warm, empathetic, deeply feeling. But he is also his father's son in his capacity for a certain kind of cold resolve when the situation demands it. And the situation, as far as William is concerned, has demanded it for some time now. If Harry has reached out to Catherine, William knows. There are no secrets in that household that William does not know about. And William's response to Harry's approach would have been filtered through the accumulated weight of every wound Harry has inflicted, every betrayal, every public humiliation, every private confidence violated. William is not going to send Catherine into that situation. He is not going to expose her, a woman in cancer recovery, a woman who has already given more than anyone had the right to ask, to the chaos and the manipulation and the bottomless need that Harry and Meghan bring with them wherever they go. He is protecting her, as he should, as any husband would. And if that means Harry does not get what he wants, then Harry does not get what he wants. That is the consequence of the choices he made. That is the world he built. There is something deeply revealing in the fact that Harry's distress is focused on Catherine specifically, not on his father, not on other members of the extended family. Catherine, because Harry knows at some level, even through the fog of his own self-absorption, that Catherine represents something he has lost and cannot replace. She represents what the right choices look like. She represents what staying looks like, what serving looks like, what building something real and lasting within the institution looks like. She is the living rebuke to every decision he has made, not because she judges him, but because she exists, because she stayed, because she worked. Because even through cancer, even through the chaos his wife helped create, she has continued to show up with a grace and a commitment that makes his own choices look exactly like what they are: small, selfish, short-sighted. And his children, Archie and Lilibet, who did not ask for any of this, who deserve better than to be used as leverage in their parents' ongoing identity crisis. His children are the ones who will carry the weight of those choices forward. That is the real tragedy here. Not Harry's tears, not his desperation, not even Catherine's entirely justified refusal to be recruited into solving a problem she did not create. The real tragedy is two small children growing up in a house where their father is not really present. Not emotionally, not in terms of the values and identity and grounding that children need, because their father has spent the last several years so consumed by his own grievances, so hollowed out by his own narrative of victimhood, that he has very little left to give them. He sees the deficit. He sees the gap between what his children have and what George and Charlotte and Louis have. He sees it clearly enough to cry about it, but seeing it and doing something about it are two entirely different things. Doing something about it would require Harry to have a conversation with himself that he has been avoiding for years. It would require him to look at his own role in the fracturing of his family. It would require him to examine what he has actually modeled for his children in terms of how you treat people who love you, how you handle disagreement, how you navigate the gap between what you want and what is right. It would require accountability. Real accountability. Not the performed accountability of a carefully worded Instagram post or a brief mention in an interview that quickly pivots back to victimhood. Real, substantive, costly accountability. The kind that costs you something. The kind that requires you to say, out loud and without qualification, I was wrong. I caused harm. I am sorry, not to the press, not to the world, to Catherine, to William, to his father, to the people he hurt most directly and most deliberately. Until that happens, Catherine's door will remain closed, as it should, as it must, because Catherine has fought too hard, sacrificed too much, and endured too much to open it to someone who has not yet demonstrated that he understands the price of what he is asking. And the children, those beautiful, innocent children who deserve the world, deserve a father who does the work. Not a father who makes phone calls to the people he has wronged asking them to do the work for him. Harry needs to be the parent his children need. Not Catherine, not the royal family. Not some distant connection to an institution he publicly renounced. He needs to be it. Until he understands that, until he genuinely internalizes it rather than simply feeling the absence of what he gave away, the tears will continue. The isolation will deepen. And the story of Prince Harry will remain exactly what it is today. A cautionary tale about a man who had everything, who chose to throw it away. And who is only now beginning to understand that some things, once broken, do not come back together simply because you have decided you want them to. Catherine does not owe Harry her forgiveness. She does not owe him her time. She does not owe him her energy, her emotional resources, or her involvement in the consequences of his choices. She is a woman fighting for her life, raising 3 extraordinary children, supporting a husband preparing to lead a nation, and doing all of it with a quiet, resolute, magnificent dignity. When Meghan Markle arrived on the royal scene, the narrative was enchanting. A modern prince falls for an independent, successful, biracial American actress. A fairy tale updated for the 21st century. A monarchy showing that it could evolve, that it could welcome someone from outside the traditional corridors of privilege, that love could cross every boundary the old world had constructed. The public wanted to believe it. The media, by and large, gave it the benefit of the doubt. And Catherine, quietly, graciously, as she does everything, extended the hand of welcome to her new sister-in-law. You know how that turned out. What followed in the years after that wedding was not a fairy tale. It was something considerably darker. A slow, grinding, relentless campaign to position Harry and Meghan as victims of an institution that had in fact given them everything. A campaign that required enemies, and found them conveniently within the very family that had welcomed, funded, housed, and supported them. Catherine became one of those enemies. not because she did anything that warranted it. Not because there is a single piece of credible evidence that she treated Meghan with anything other than the courtesy and professionalism her position demanded, but because the narrative required a villain, and Catherine, poised, beloved, picture-perfect Catherine, made a satisfyingly complex target. If you could paint her as cold or unkind or unwelcoming, you could tell a story about an institution that rejected a warm, open-hearted outsider. You could make the monarchy look cruel and make yourselves look noble by comparison. It was strategy. Calculated, deliberate, ruthless strategy, and Harry went along with it. That is the part that sticks. That is the part that even now remains genuinely difficult to process. Not that Meghan pursued this strategy. She had her own ambitions and her own agenda, and her behavior is explicable if not excusable in that context. But Harry who grew up with Catherine as his sister-in-law. Harry who knew her, who had sat at family dinners with her, who had watched her build her life alongside William with patience and grace, who knew better than almost anyone that the portrait being painted of her was a lie. He went along with it. He sat on that sofa next to his wife and he let the lie stand. He let Catherine be painted. He let her reputation absorb damage she had done nothing to deserve. And then he wrote a book and painted her some more. The question of why is one that psychologists and biographers will be picking apart for decades. The most charitable interpretation is that Harry was so thoroughly under the influence of a dominant partner, and so deep in his own psychological struggles, that he lost the capacity for independent moral judgment. The less charitable interpretation is that he knew exactly what he was doing, and did it anyway because it served his interests in the moment. Neither interpretation is particularly flattering. And neither changes the outcome, which is that Catherine was wronged, repeatedly, publicly, and by someone who knew better. Now fast forward to today, to a man in tears, to a phone call or an approach through intermediaries or whatever form this reaching out has taken, to a request so audacious that it
nearly beggars belief. Help me with my children. Help me give them what I apparently cannot give them myself. Help me connect them to the royal identity and the values of service and duty and tradition that I spent years telling the world were toxic and damaging and not worth preserving. Help me undo, at least for my children, the consequences of the choices I made. And please do all of this while you are recovering from cancer, while your own children need you, while your husband is preparing to be king, while the institution I attacked is watching everything you do. Just pop that in between everything else, Catherine. Won't take a moment. I keep returning to the cancer. I keep returning to it because I think it is the element of this story that most clearly illuminates the nature of Harry's self-absorption, and I think it needs to be stated plainly and repeatedly until it lands with the full weight it deserves. Princess Catherine was diagnosed with cancer. She announced it with a courage and a composure that silenced every critic who had ever questioned her warmth or her authenticity or her capacity to connect with ordinary people. In that video, filmed in a garden, honest, unvarnished, frightened and brave in equal measure, she was more real than anything Harry or Meghan have managed to manufacture in 5 years of trying. She has been fighting. She has been undergoing treatment. She has been navigating one of the most frightening experiences a human being can face, while simultaneously managing the public duties of a Princess of Wales, the private duties of a mother of 3, and the personal duties of a wife whose husband is also carrying an extraordinary burden. She has done all of this without complaint, without a documentary, without a tell-all, without a single moment of public self-pity. And in the middle of all of this, in the middle of her fight, in the middle of her recovery, in the middle of the most vulnerable period of her life, Harry's problems arrive at her door, not a letter of apology. Not a genuine, private, humble acknowledgement of the harm caused. Not an offer of support or a simple human expression of concern for her well-being, a request for help. The entitlement required to make that request in those circumstances is not the ordinary entitlement of a privileged man who has not yet learned to consider others. It is something more extreme than that. It is the entitlement of someone so fundamentally disconnected from the emotional reality of the people around him that he genuinely cannot see the grotesque inappropriateness of what he is asking. And this possibility should not be dismissed. He can see it. He simply does not care. Because his need is greater, in his own estimation, than her capacity to refuse. That is a chilling thought. But it is consistent with the pattern of behavior we have observed from Harry over the past 5 years. Let us talk about that pattern. Because I think it is important to name it clearly, without euphemism or diplomatic softening. The pattern is this: Harry identifies a need. Harry identifies the person best positioned to meet that need. Harry reaches out to that person with apparent sincerity and emotional vulnerability. And if the person does not respond in the way Harry wants, Harry reframes their refusal as a wound inflicted upon him, as evidence of the cruelty and coldness he has always suffered at the hands of his family, as material for the next interview, the next book, the next documentary. We have watched this cycle operate in his relationship with his father. We have watched it operate in his relationship with William. We have watched it operate in his relationship with the institution as a whole. And now, it appears, we are watching it operate in his relationship with Catherine. He reaches out. She declines. And somewhere in a Montecito mansion, the narrative is already being shaped. The story of how Catherine refused to help. How the royal family turned its back on his children. How he really tried to build bridges, but they would not meet him halfway. Do not be surprised when that story emerges, because it will. It always does, but here is what is different this time. Here is what makes this particular chapter of the Sussex saga distinct from everything that has come before it. The public is not buying it anymore. There has been a fundamental shift in how people receive Harry's narrative of victimhood, and it has been building for some time, and it has now reached a tipping point that I think is genuinely irreversible. The goodwill that once extended him the benefit of the doubt, the sympathy generated by the loss of his mother, the genuine warmth people felt.
The younger prince, the early willingness to believe that perhaps the royal family really had treated Meghan badly, that goodwill is gone. It is not gone because people are cruel. It is not gone because the public is unforgiving or lacks empathy. It is gone because Harry used it up. He drew on it again and again in service of a narrative that grew progressively less credible with each telling. And now the account is empty. There is nothing left to draw on when he speaks now. People do not reach for sympathy. They reach for skepticism. They ask what is being sold. They look for the angle. And they find it because there always is one. That shift matters enormously for what happens next, because Harry's entire strategy has been predicated on public sympathy. On the idea that if he could just tell his story, his real story, the unfiltered truth of his suffering, people would understand and support him. Every book, every interview, every documentary has been an attempt to secure and maintain that sympathy, and it is not working anymore. The audience has changed. The patience has expired, and the man standing on the stage, still delivering the same performance, is playing to a theatre that is quietly, steadily emptying. Meanwhile, back in Windsor and Kensington and the various palaces and estates that constitute the world Harry walked away from, life goes on. Purposefully, dutifully, quietly, William continues to prepare for a role that will define not just his own life but the future of an institution that has survived for over 1,000 years. He does this without complaint, without drama, without outsourcing his anxieties to streaming platforms. Catherine continues to recover, continues to show up, continues to demonstrate, with every public appearance and every private moment that filters through into the public consciousness, that grace under pressure is not a performance but a practice. Something you do every day, even when it is hard, especially when it is hard. George and Charlotte and Louis continue to grow into the people their parents are raising them to be. Grounded, purposeful, real. And Harry watches all of this from 6,000 miles away and feels, presumably, the acute and growing weight of what he gave up, what he traded away, what he cannot get back. There is an argument, made occasionally, usually by people sympathetic to the Sussex cause, that Harry's reaching out to Catherine represents growth, that it shows self-awareness. That a man who recognizes the deficits in his children's upbringing and tries to address them, is demonstrating exactly the kind of parental responsibility we should want to see. I want to engage with that argument seriously, because it deserves a serious response rather than simple dismissal. The problem with it is this: genuine growth does not express itself as a request for someone else to solve your problems. Genuine growth expresses itself as a change in behavior, as a willingness to make hard choices, have hard conversations, and accept hard truths about yourself and your situation. If Harry genuinely recognized the deficits in his children's upbringing, if he genuinely understood that the Hollywood, celebrity-adjacent, brand deal-saturated environment of Montecito was not providing Archie and Lilibet with the grounding and identity and sense of purpose they need, then the response to that recognition would not be to call Catherine. The response would be to change the environment. The response would be to have a direct, honest, difficult conversation with Meghan about what their children need and what their current lifestyle is or is not providing. The response would be to examine his own presence in his children's lives, not as a brand or a narrative or a Sussex story, but as a father, as a man. As the primary male role model in the lives of two small people who did not choose any of this and who deserve better than to be the emotional fulcrum of their parents' unresolved identity crisis. That is what growth looks like. Not a phone call to Catherine, not tears and intermediaries and approaches through back channels. Hard, private, costly change, the kind that nobody films, the kind that does not generate headlines or sympathy or Netflix deals, the kind that is real. And perhaps most importantly, perhaps most painfully for Harry to confront, if he truly wants his children connected to their royal heritage, to their British identity, to the values and traditions of the family he came from, there is a very obvious and very available solution. Go home, not permanently, not necessarily, but go, take the children to London. Let them spend time with their grandfather, let them know their cousins. Let them walk through the parks and the palaces and the places that are part of their story, their history, their birthright. But that would require something Harry has shown himself deeply unwilling to do. It would require going home without the protection of a grievance, without the shield of victimhood, without the ability to control the narrative. It would require walking into rooms where people remember clearly what he said and wrote and allowed to be said, and doing so without the armor of justification. It would require humility, the real kind, the kind that costs something. And it would require having a conversation with Meghan about all of this that Harry, for whatever reason, love, fear, dependency, habit, has clearly not yet been able to have, so instead he calls Catherine. And Catherine, because she is both intelligent and self-preserving in the best sense of that phrase, says no, or says nothing. Or communicates through her own intermediaries that she has quite enough on her plate. Thank you very much, and that Harry's plate is his own responsibility. And she is right. She is entirely, completely, unambiguously right. The people in the comments will debate this. They always do. Some will say Catherine should be the bigger person. That forgiveness is its own reward. That the children are innocent and should not suffer for their father's mistakes. And to those people I say, Catherine forgiving Harry, privately and in her own time and on her own terms, is entirely her prerogative and nobody's business but hers. But forgiveness is not the same as availability. It is not the same as willingness to be used. It is not the same as an obligation to step into someone else's mess and start cleaning. You can forgive someone and still decline to rescue them. You can wish someone well and still maintain the boundary that protects your own peace. You can be a good person, a generous person, a person of deep faith and profound compassion and still look at a situation and say, this is not mine to fix. Catherine has enough to fix. She has her health to fix. She has her family to hold together during an extraordinarily difficult period. She has a nation watching her with hope and admiration and genuine love, willing her to recover, willing her to return to full strength, willing her forward. Harry is not her project. He never was. And the sooner he understands that, the sooner he internalizes the fact that he does not have a claim on the people he hurt, the sooner he might begin the process of actually rebuilding something real, not for the cameras, not for the narrative, not for the next chapter of the Sussex story, for his children, for himself, For the man he used to be, somewhere underneath all of this, and might conceivably become again if he ever finds the courage to look for him, that is the story of today.